almost like the whole movie is kind of this puzzle that both sides are playing, where it's, do you believe him? Is he telling the truth? 18-year-old me thought this was a masterpiece.
Should we talk about the big twist? I think when Salman Khan is 14,000 years old, he'll still be acting with like 30 years. Welcome everyone to the Lost in Thought podcast. This is a podcast where we have interesting conversations with interesting people. And I have a very interesting guest today. Please welcome my friend Karun Kannampilly. Welcome, Karun. Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you because, like I told you before, as soon as I had this idea, there were 3 or 4 names that popped into my head immediately, of which one was yours. So glad that we are finally doing this. And I'll just introduce you a little bit to our listeners/viewers. So for those who don't know, Karun is a professional drummer. He currently plays with a couple of Mumbai-based bands like Long Distances and the Koniac Net. That is 2 separate brands. That's not one long band name.
It sounds like it would be a great long band name, though.
Yeah, that's for your next band. You have an idea now. He also plays with artists like Kamakshi Khanna, Raghav, Meattle, and Shruti, Hassan. He's performed at some major festivals, both nationally and internationally, including at Lollapalooza for the last 2 years running. Karun is also a drum teacher. He's visiting faculty at the True School of Music at Vijaybhoomi University. He's also the founder of Drum House, where he himself teaches drums and cultivates musical talent. On a side note, Karun, along with a few other musician friends, played at my wife and my wedding, like my wedding basically. I guess wedding as my wife's. So I'm only mentioning this because it is an additional credential that proves how good a teacher Karun is. Because there was this one particular song where he taught me how to play the tambourine, and although I didn't end up doing it on the day, I still remember the simplicity and ease with which he taught me that instrument. So he's a very good teacher, in short.
Yeah, we can change this from a podcast to another tambourine lesson if you want.
Maybe the next episode. But yeah, Karun's been playing, recording, and teaching drums for about 17 years, and he's probably one of the best drummers in the country. He's also a game enthusiast, so he loves both board games as well as video games. And he's notoriously competitive when it comes to games, so if you ever get a chance to play with him, you'll have a lot of fun, but also watch out. So yeah, that's about it. Anything that I missed out, Karun?
Thanks. This is a great introduction. I feel like you have a future, if not in just podcasting in general, just introducing people. Like when they walk in the room, every time I walk in a room, I want you to tell people all of these things.
Sure. I also remember you saying this when I introduced you for our Sangeet. So I will keep this in mind. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And the movie that you're going to be talking about today is The Man from Earth. And I'm curious to know why you thought of picking this movie. We'll get into a lot of details soon, but what made you think of this when we decided to have this conversation?
So basically, I love watching movies and shows like most humans do. But I don't ever really rewatch any movies. I think Man from Earth is one of those movies I've rewatched because the only exception I have for rewatching movies is when I want to introduce it to somebody else and I'm excited about the movie. I'll watch it again just to show it to someone new. So Man from Earth is one of those movies. I think it came at a time when I was like young and impressionable, and the concepts really blew me away. So I was like, guys, you have to see this. And I probably watched it 3 and I guess like 4 times now because I rewatched it for this episode. But it's probably one of the higher counts of rewatches that I have. I think the only movie above that is Lord of the Rings, where I've watched it with like 7 or 8 different people.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar. I feel like there's just so much to watch, read, experience that I don't want to rewatch things as much as possible. And just like you, usually if I'm rewatching movies, it's because I'm watching it with somebody else who's watching it for the first time. The only exception is, I think, Speed, which I watched when I was a kid like 20 times or something.
Nice. That's a great movie to watch 20 times.
Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah. But Man from Earth, this is my second viewing only. So I watched it once many years ago when I was in college, similar to you, and now I watched it again in preparation for this conversation. So I really like this choice because it's not a super well-known or major movie, but it has a cult following, and we'll see why when we start talking about it in a few minutes. Before we do that, I'll just tell people about this movie for those who may not know much about it. So this is a 2007 American film. It's directed by a guy called Richard Schenkman, who's mainly a director of low-budget films. So you're unlikely to have watched anything else by Richard Schenkman. This is also a low-budget movie. So The Man from Earth was made for a meager $200,000, and the whole movie was shot with 2 Panasonic camcorders in just 8 days, apparently. So very, very low budget, even by
Only feels like that.
it does feel like that, yes. But the writer of this movie is a slightly more reputed person. So it's written by someone called Jerome Bixby. Now, Bixby was a short story and screenwriter, and he actually has a story called It's a Good Life, which is part of the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. So it's a story worth checking out. This story was adapted into an episode of the famous show The Twilight Zone as well. And Jerome Bixby was also a writer for about 4 episodes of Star Trek. So somebody that's a fairly well-known writer or a reputable writer. And in the late 90s, when he was on his deathbed, that's when he wrote the first draft of what would eventually become The Man from Earth. So that's the background of this film. I'll just summarize it very briefly. And here I want to mention that in this conversation, we're going to get into spoiler territory. So, and this is a movie that you can sort of ruin through spoilers. So I would recommend maybe watching this movie before you listen to this conversation. Or if you don't mind spoilers, you can listen to it right now.
It's super spoilable, and that was kind of one of the like when we were talking about picking a movie, I was a little bit worried about, like, I don't want to completely ruin this movie for someone. I mean, if you're gonna watch it, you should watch it first and then listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I agree. My recommendation would be to watch it first and then listen to the rest of this conversation. But I know some people aren't very particular and they don't mind listening to spoilers. But this has some fairly, like, I would say, big spoilers for that. Yeah. But I'll just briefly describe the plot of this film. So, a university professor named John, I won't mention his surname right now because I'll mention it later in another context. But yeah, let's say his name is John. A university professor called John somewhat abruptly decides to leave his position as professor. And his fellow faculty members are coming over on his last night to just sort of say farewell and say goodbye to him. And they ask him why he's leaving so suddenly. Initially, he's reluctant to tell them anything about it, but they're really insistent on knowing more about this. And he says, okay, fine, I'm just going to tell you something which I've never told anyone before. And he tells them the reason why he's moving so suddenly. And are you ready for this? So this is where the spoilers come in. I mean, this you come to know like 10 minutes into the movie, so this is not the major spoiler. This is kind of the premise of this movie. But John basically says that, you know what, I'm 14,000 years old. I was born during the Paleolithic age. At some point in my 30s, I just stopped aging, and I've been alive for the last 14,000 years. And every 10 years, apparently, he just moves location because every 10 years or so, people around him start to notice that he hasn't aged in the last 10 years. So every 10 years, he sets up somewhere else and, starts a new life. And obviously, at first, the friends around him think that this is a joke when he reveals this to them. But then, the professor is very insistent that he's telling the truth. And then you see a range of reactions from them, from like just good humor to playing along with him, to testing his knowledge, to starting to get annoyed and eventually very angry with him. So there's a gamut of emotions that the people around him experience as he's telling them the story. And that's kind of what this movie is about, where this professor who's claiming to be 14,000 years old is just telling his friends what he's seen, what he's learned, and whom he's met over the course of his 14,000 year long life. And then there are a couple of really big bombshells or one very big bombshell that he drops at some point in this film, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But that's kind of the summary. Have I missed anything big?
I think it's important to mention that all his friends are also professors and like experts in their field. So they're like really quizzing him with what I consider are kind of intelligent questions. Like they're really thought out, smart questions for the most part. So that makes it kind of interesting. It's not just like a bunch of random people asking him questions. It's like these are the top people in their fields, or at least they're portrayed like that way, and then they're asking really serious, smart questions to determine whether he's telling the truth or not.
Yes, that's a good point to make, because his friends are like literally, there's a biologist, there's an anthropologist, there's an art historian. So there's an archaeologist, there's professors from various fields and disciplines who have the ability to integrate him and ask him questions that can validate whether or not he's actually telling the truth or whether he's just bluffing really well. So yeah, that's kind of what this movie is about. And for people watching this in India, this is not available on the major platforms, but it's available on this platform called Plex, which is where I watched it. And
I watched it there too. Worst platform ever. Can we
Yeah.
please not have platforms like that?
be prepared for some very terrible ad breaks if you're watching this on Plex, but it's cool. I mean, at least I was able to watch it legally. um, but okay, so Karun, there are 5 reasons why you like this movie. Reason number 1 why you like this movie is that it's a thought experiment. So can you elaborate on that?
So in general, I am the kind of person who loves like riddles, games, like those kind of things, things that like get your brain really working. And this whole movie is based off that, right? It's like almost like the whole movie is kind of this puzzle that both sides are playing, where it's, do you believe him? Is he telling the truth? What are the kind of questions you can ask him to kind of maybe if he's lying to trip him up, or like what are the like basically this whole back and forth of, is he actually a 14,000-year-old man, or is he just full of shit? That part of the movie I love.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good thought experiment because you sort of think about what are the various dimensions that somebody would have experienced who's been alive that long, right? So they would have seen many places across the world. They would have experienced different religions, different empires. And these are the kind of things that they start to see in this man's experiences as he's talking about them. But one thing that I thought this movie did really well, because at various points, he's not able to answer some questions where they ask him like, oh, where were you on this particular day in 1492 or whatever, or describe this particular random thing in history to me. And he clarifies that you have to realize that I just have the viewpoint of one man, and I only lived in one place at a time. So it's ridiculous to expect me to know everything about history just because I've been alive this long.
Yeah,
It's
he's
not
not
like-
omnipotent, which is kind of really cool. Like, it's not a omnipotence. It's like one person's lived experience over 14,000 years, which is, I think, way cooler than if he was pretending to be a god or something,
So he talks about how the first 2,000 years or something he was in, or for 2,000 years he was in Sumeria, then he went to Babylon, then he went east, and he talks about various things. And I think that's a really good decision by this movie to say, let's restrict it to just, he's still human. He just doesn't know why he's immortal. He's just stopped aging at a certain point. But he's not omnipotent. He's not all-knowing. He doesn't, he's not even like, he's not like some savant who just knows everything about everything.
Right.
And he's open about the fact that he still doesn't understand many things, and there's many things that he doesn't know enough about. There's many things that he's forgotten.
And most of the things that he does know about, he has learned about from textbooks and learned about from other human findings, which I thought, again, was really cool. It's like he had to put a lot of his life experiences into perspective, like via reading about them in later works of man, which I think is also a very cool concept about this movie.
Yeah, that's true. At one point, he says something like, I think I saw what was ultimately the UK from the French, from France or something of that sort. And then he explains that, okay, it's only years later when you read about geography and you learn about these various things that you're able to put into perspective what you experienced, which I thought was a really cool way to look at it. And I think, like you said earlier, the different friends that he has are well chosen by the writers of this movie, where you have one person who's able to bring the biology angle where he says, oh, there are like the body regenerates cells and theoretically it's possible to have perfect regeneration and that person doesn't age. And maybe that's what's happening with this person. You have an anthropologist who's able to talk about human behaviors and how people have lived over the centuries and millennia, and he's able to ask him intelligent questions as well as poke holes or like try to poke holes in his story. You have historians, art historians, archaeologists, similarly, who can corroborate or like try to interrogate him in different ways. So I think this thought experiment is very well designed, and my guess is it probably originated with the writer as a thought experiment, and then he sort of just decided to play it out and say, what would this really look like?
I feel like, yeah, this guy has written episodes for the Twilight Zone and Star Trek, so he's already really entrenched in sci-fi. And this is such a great like sci-fi kind of idea without most of the tropes that sci-fi usually has, which I really love that about this also.
Yeah, and I guess that's bringing us to your reason number 2, which is that it's sci-fi without visual effects. So you want to talk about that?
So I think a couple of the reasons are kind of interlinked, where it's like, yeah, it's sci-fi without visual effects. They've done this like 12 Angry Men thing, which they're just basically in one room, sitting down, and maybe there's a little bit outside the room, but there's not many locations. It's one conversation that is carrying this entire 1.5 hour movie, which is, I think, super hard to do. And the fact that it kept me kind of hooked for the whole time, just by listening to these guys talk and not seeing any like explosions or aliens or whatever, was really, really smart and cool and interesting.
Yeah. So I think this film was also shortlisted for the Saturn Awards Best Screenplay, which rewards work in science fiction. So yeah, I agree that it's not what you'd usually associate with science fiction, which is like the spaceships and the sci-fi. I mean, the visual effects and the explosions and things like that. So it's sort of like a more quiet and meditative sci-fi. And I think one thing that's interesting here is it's less interested in the science of it. So there could have been a sort of section of this movie where they actually try to explain why this person is alive for 14,000 years. But I don't think they go into that. So there's this biologist guy who says that, okay, actually the human body is designed to live like 190 years, and most of us die way earlier from slow poisoning. But that's the closest it kind of gets to some kind of explanation. And
I'm super glad they didn't dwell on that for too long. I like, because like there's so many more interesting questions than like, oh, how is this happening to you? The lived experience that he kind of shares is, I feel like, a way more interesting aspect to the whole thing than why this is happening,
Yeah. Do you feel like this movie did enough with its premise? Because I feel like for a movie that isn't relying on anything except the story, right? It's pretty much just the story in this unfolding in this room. It's not got any special effects, any bells and whistles to kind of dress it up. So I felt like it was a little short. I felt like it could have been longer and deeper, and like it could have done more than it did. I don't know whether you share the same opinion.
So 18-year-old me did not think so. 18-year-old me thought this was a masterpiece. Like it was the best shit I'd ever seen. But 35-year-old me was like, I wanted to ask questions myself. I don't know what questions I would ask, but I feel like they needed to dive more into a lot of these like aspects that he was talking about. Everything was, I feel like all the questions that needed to be asked were asked, or at least a lot of them. But follow-up questions. I wanted more follow-up questions. Like, especially about things like survivor's guilt. Like this guy has watched every single human being he's known die at some point and lived past all of them. He's had multiple families over multiple years. How does he feel about all of that? Like watching your wife die for the 100th time, do you now not care about humans dying anymore? Or like how does it affect you now? And do you still carry all the grief from the first time, or have you been able to somehow let go of all the grief from just time being this healing thing that it is?
Yeah. So I think we're touching upon all of your points. So I'm just going to abandon the point 1, point 2 format, and we just
I agree.
Once.
I agree.
Which makes sense for a movie about a guy that's supposedly 14,000 years old. Let's just tackle it in the entirety rather than point by point. Uh, but yeah, I mean, there's so much I agree with you. I feel like everything that he was saying was just throwing up five more questions for me. But very rarely did the other people in the movie sort of ask those questions.
Correct.
They just sort of went on to something else. So it's kind of like question A that they ask is very profound. He answers it, but I feel like they would have so many things to ask in response to that, but they sort of just react. They sort of either laugh at it, or they brush it off, or they get annoyed with it.
Yeah.
And obviously, the characters in the movie, so they're just fulfilling the function of getting to the next part of the script of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But to make it feel more real or organic, I feel like, you know, I would have also wanted to see more of it.
Right. I fully agree with you. And yeah, I think some of the reactions were irritating at points. Like, you know, the anger, which I kind of get also. It's like, okay, this guy, I've known him for 10 years, and now he's just saying this bullshit that at least I believe it's bullshit. So I'm pissed off that this is how I'm saying goodbye to him. But like, you're a professor, like, just play along with it, see where it goes, you know. And I think some of the characters were doing that, but some of the characters were super defensive about the whole thing, and I didn't enjoy defensive characters, but I guess they were integral to move the story forward.
Yeah, I really liked the questions that the psychiatrist guy asked. So this guy, I think his name is Will. He's a psychiatry professor, from what I'm assuming. So he comes in sort of halfway into the movie, where these other characters apparently call this guy up and say that this John is acting very, you know, weird and silly. And this guy comes in, and then I like the questions that he asks, because he asks things like, how did it feel to watch everyone that you love die? And did you ever wish that it was you? He talks about something like I forget exactly what he says, but it's kind of like he implies that did you ever think that you're not just outliving people, but you're taking life from them? Because there are all of these myths about people who take the life force and drain the life force. Are you one of those people who drain the life force?
Yeah, which I thought was really cool, because it's like he was the start of the vampire myth, which is kind of which is like a cool fact that they kind of just threw in there. Again, did not go deeper into it. It was just like a one sentence that, oh, you know, the start of the vampire myth, very smart, and then they move on.
Yeah, and this psychiatry professor asks a lot of questions about life and death, and you learn a few minutes later that he lost his wife the day before. And this is the guy that gets the angriest, I think, probably in the entire movie, because he starts talking about, like, what you're saying is true, how can we not hate you or resent you for this? Because we have to watch everyone die. We know that we have to die, but you are not going to die, and you're just going to live. And at some point, I think it escalates very melodramatically. He actually takes out a gun and points it at him, and they have this big face-off.
Yeah.
So I felt like that gun was very unnecessary in that scene, but I guess you sort of understand it later when somebody says that, okay, his wife died the previous day.
I had forgotten the explanation to that, like, you know, because I watched it many years later. So I'd forgotten the fact that his wife had died. But when he pulled out that gun, I was like, what is happening? Why would you pull out a gun at this guy? But it kind of, again, it's a little bit of a half-baked explanation as to why he went to that extreme. But it's still, again, great to like get the reactions and, like, you know, move the story along.
Yeah. And by the way, I just remembered you also mentioned that when 18 you thought this was a masterpiece, and it was probably the same with me, because so I always rate every movie that I watch on IMDb just as a record of, you know, what I watched.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I watched this, like in 2007 or whatever, I gave this a 10 out of 10, because I was just that impressed. Exactly like what you said, my mind is blown. What is this concept?
Yeah.
I can't believe someone came up with this. But this would probably be like a 7 for me at this point of time. I don't know though.
Right. I think for nostalgia, I would push it up by 1 point, maybe like an 8, because I still think the premise is insane. I still think a lot of the story is really good, and a lot of the themes are amazing. But like you said earlier, they could have done more, and there is a bit of like cheesiness to it, and there are a few things that it falls short. But in general, I am happy that this movie exists, and I'm happy that I watched it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm definitely happy that this movie exists. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. For me, also, it would be between like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I would, if I'm being generous, probably give it an 8 because, um, like you said, the concept is really good, and I think it's a good script also.
Yeah.
Maybe because of budget limitations, I'm guessing they couldn't make it longer.
Right.
But if they had added, say, 30 minutes to this movie, to explore some of the themes that you mentioned a little bit more, like Survivor's Guild, all of that stuff, I think could have been ideally. I mean, this I think there's enough material in here for a mini series also, like 5 or 6 episodes.
That would be insane if they did this as a mini series where it was like 6 episodes long and it was all in this room where they're just talking about things and each episode kind of touches on one big subject and they really dived into it. I think that would be something I would watch for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's enough material easily for a mini series because just think about how much there is to unpack in 14,000 years of life, right? There are these. One is this history where you actually talk about different wars or big major events, and you can get a little bit more into those things than this movie does. Second is there's famous people in history that this man from Earth has either met or been influenced by, which again, it's sort of done in passing, and then not one thing, not very much not in passing. We'll get to that. But yeah, it's, again, could there's a lot more that you could get out of that premise. Then there's all this moral element to it and the psychological element to it in terms of what effect does being alive for so long really have on somebody. And I feel like because of the time constraint and maybe the budget constraint, the movie is sort of just brushing over all of these elements very lightly. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of juice in here for like a mini series.
I think they did a sequel, but apparently it was rated like super badly. So I didn't watch it, but I think it's called Man from Earth Holocene.
That's right. It was, and it came out 10 years after this one. And I mean, I haven't seen it either, but I'm interested to see it, if only to see whether the guy actually looks, because he probably looks 10 years older because the actor is not timeless and immortal. So how did they deal with it?
So I saw the poster and he does look older. So I don't know how they're going to explain that away, but I guess
they should have done like a boyhood / before sunrise thing where they shot 3 different versions of this movie at the same time.
Oh wow, that would be cool.
Right, and they released them like 10 years apart. That would have been better.
Yeah, I mean foresight, right? Like you can't. It's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask because it's almost impossible because they might be making references to things that, I mean, it'll just seem outdated probably because unless they're really smart about how they come up, like what they say in the movie.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yes, should we talk about the big twist? Because
I guess so, right?
The main thing I remembered about this movie. So why don't you describe what that big twist is?
I went to IMDb just to check out what other people were rating this movie now, and there was a bunch of review bombs, like half a star, 1 star. I guess Popcorn Time, there was not Popcorn. What is it called? Rotten Tomatoes. There was like half-star ratings, mainly because people were like, "This movie is blasphemous," because in the movie he claims that he was Jesus, which is this huge bomb. At the point where you're thinking, okay, maybe we're not going anywhere. Suddenly, like, it comes up quite organically and he's reluctant to say it, obviously, because already people are pissed off with him. And then he's like, I was Jesus because I learned from the Buddha and then went and tried to take those teachings to the West. And obviously with superstition and over time where everything got like kind of diluted and all these myths came up about how Jesus was. But actually, I was just a guy trying to teach the Buddha's philosophies in the West.
Yeah. And I don't know about you. I mean, I'm guessing you also love this twist.
Loved it.
Yeah. Because everything that's leading up to it makes it not seem ridiculous because it seems fairly logical that, a guy who's been around for that long would have wandered the world, learned many things. And then he also has this perspective of how reality is distorted into myths and stuff.
Right.
So it comes about in a very understated way where he's not trying to claim that he's some god or messiah. So the way that it unfolds in the movie is that at some point, I mean, at various points, he's mentioned that he knew Vincent van Gogh because he gives him some painting. He mentions that I met the Buddha. Luckily, I was in India at the time of the Buddha, and I met the Buddha. And at some point, I think somebody asked him, like, have you met any of the characters or any of the important people from biblical reference or something of that sort?
Yeah. From the
And
Bible, basically.
he actually says, oh, I think we should skip this. I don't want to talk about this. And I didn't anticipate the conversation going in this direction. So he's very hesitant to say, like, why he wants to skip this. But then he pretty much reveals that he not only lived in biblical times, he not only was a major person mentioned in the Bible, he was the major person mentioned in the Bible. So he was Jesus, or the inspiration for Jesus, or what myth eventually turned into Jesus. And then, like you said, he mentions that he was just trying to take the Buddha's teachings west, and I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I was fully bought into that twist.
I loved it. I loved that twist for sure. In general, the way he's like, first of all, he's super calm about it. Like, he's not like, oh, I am Jesus now, follow me. Like,
Yeah.
it could have gone in very terrible directions, but he's such a nice, level-headed, likable character. And like you said, it makes a lot of sense. It's the same teachings, and a lot of places where they're like, oh, were you Moses? Like, when they're trying to guess, he was just trying to be like, no, Moses, has been. It's just a myth that's come over many different civilizations, and then they name all the civilizations and how Moses existed in many different forms, and it was very, very interesting. But even in that twist, there were so many cool questions you could ask.
Yeah.
But we spent a lot of the time just being upset about this, which also I get because I saw the review bombing. People were pissed off about this.
Yeah. So if there's a mini series, I would probably end one episode on this revelation, and then you could do an entire episode just on the Jesus twist.
Right.
Because you can ask him all sorts of things, right? You can ask him, like, how did you feel when you saw what happened in the Crusades and there were holy wars fought in your name, and when, like, there was this whole church versus science. Like, there's so much that you can do.
Right.
And these history professors and all don't think of asking any of this.
Yeah, it's all just summarized in like one sentence, right? I think the sentence is something like, they say if Jesus and Buddha see what was done in their name, they would laugh about it or cry about it. Like, and it's not even him saying that sentence, right? It's one of the other professors is like, I guess the reason why the movie kind of justifies them not asking so many questions is because they don't believe him, for the most part. I guess that's kind of the reasoning behind not fully buying into it and fully asking the important questions.
Yeah. So I want to talk about two things related to this Jesus twist, and I'm curious to get your opinion on them. One is, you mentioned that this guy, whose name is John, he seems like level-headed and likable, and he's not like this flamboyant guy or like this egotistical guy. He just seems very understated and down to earth man from earth, I guess.
Nice.
But my question to you is, do you think somebody like him would be like that? Because I think at that point, if I live 14,000 years, I'm pretty much a god, right? I've seen millennia of people around me sort of just dying and crumbling. And I'm just walking through time like a god. And then I've had this experience where literally people have raised me to be a god, where I have become Jesus Christ. And then I've seen an entire civilization sort of built around my name and worshipping me.
Mm-hmm.
And he also mentions some island in Papua New Guinea or something where he also is worshipped as a god. I don't know if that was a joke, but
I think he was joking about that one.
Maybe that was a joke, but I would assume that it's not the first time that he's been attracted some sort of reverence or awe. And I feel like human nature being what it is, wouldn't a person like that just be a complete megalomaniac?
So, I have a thought on this. It's
Yeah.
like, maybe... have you seen Sandman?
What man?
Sandman?
No.
Okay.
Oh, Sandman, the Neil Gaiman
Neil
one.
Gaiman thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Neil Gaiman now is problematic in his own ways, but
Yeah.
that there's one part in the show. I never read the graphic novels, but there's a part in the show where these guys he gives somebody the gift of immortality, and every 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever, they meet at a bar somewhere and they talk about what their experiences are and whether they still want immortality. And this guy who he meets keeps going through cycles of like, like, this is the worst shit ever, or no, this is the best shit ever, and whatever. He's going, because this guy's gone to 14,000 years. I'm sure there was a period in his life where he felt like a god. But maybe over time, he figured out how to, like, squash his ego and, like, whatever, like, meditate on it or reach a higher level of enlightenment. Like he said, he studied under the Buddha and really loved those philosophies. So maybe even if he lost his way, he found his way back through the old teachings that he had. That was my thought on this whole, like, why he's not an asshole, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I that's kind of the way I talked myself into it as well, where the Buddha connection I also thought of, where maybe he's just like this super enlightened being that is very conscious about things like attachment and suffering and all of that. And he's just learned how to leave his ego behind. But yeah, I mean, I definitely see a version of this where, I mean, first of all, I definitely understand it's not implausible to me that somebody could live this long, and because of the sheer scope of knowledge and wisdom and enlightenment available to you, you become a very down-to-earth person and you become a very sort of grounded person, or the ultimate monk, sort of. But I think there's also another version of the story which is also very interesting, where the guy is just like, horrible, megalomaniacal and all, and like he's just a dictator or whatever it is. And then you sort of unpack what has given him this ego.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that also, or even if we saw flashes of that, maybe once or twice in this film.
So the flashes I feel like that I got from it, which kind of refer to him not being the best person, is the fact that he leaves all his families in 10 years and he's never told anyone that this is his thing. So he leaves a note and just abandons his family, which, I mean, in the story, you get to know that this is the first time, or maybe the second time, he's ever told people about the fact that he's 14,000 years old. So every family he's had, every kid he's had, every person he's ever like been in sort of a relationship with, he's just written a note and fucked off, which is a terrible thing to do, I think. So I guess he's not all good, for sure.
Yeah. And also, now that you mention it, I remember there was a scene where he's talking to this woman called Sandy, who I guess is in love with him. Mm-hmm. And she kind of confesses her love to him. And he says something like, I'm fond of you, I'm attracted to you, but I can't go as far as love because I've sort of experienced loss too many times for it to affect me anymore. And I've gotten over it too many times.
Yeah.
So maybe that makes kind of sense, where he's just experienced emotion, loss, things like that so many times that it ceased to affect him in some way.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I would have liked to see some sort of exploration of that, or like somebody else in this movie touching on these topics a little bit.
Yeah.
Rather than us wondering whether that's kind of a gap in the writing or whether that's
intentional kind of like hole for your brain to fill in.
Yeah, and the second thing that was interesting to me is the reaction of this one friend called Edith, who is the religious friend. So I think she's the art history professor or something. And she just loses her mind when he claims to be Jesus. So she just says, this is blasphemy and I can't take this and whatever. And sure, I mean, that's a very valid reaction. I also was envisioning the alternate version of this movie where she has a very different reaction. Like, what if her reaction was actually to respond with like awe and reverence, and like she just throws herself at his feet saying that you're my god and whatever. That would also be an interesting thing to sort of explore, don't you think?
100%. I think that would be very, very cool. But I guess, like, again, this is, each one of them is fighting their own battle of whether to believe or not to believe. And when you've devoted so much of your life to believing in Christianity and believing in Jesus, to suddenly abandon all of what you thought for your whole life and be like, okay, you are my savior now, is a bit of a stretch, I think, for this movie. But if they got there in some sort of organic way where she's already convinced that he's telling the truth and then he drops this bomb, then I guess it could work. But I think in the movie they made the right decision of her being pissed off. Even though like her being pissed off wasn't really adding to my enjoyment of this movie. But it is probably the correct response to what was said, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's very natural. Although it's very interesting how, okay, if you're somebody that, say, believes in Jesus and now you have a fairly, say you have a credible or as credible as it can get person in front of you claiming that he was Jesus, it says something about human nature where even if you're religious, you're still going to believe that that person is lying or like playing a joke on you. And the possibility or least likely to consider is that God is actually before you, which I thought was an interesting aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's like you can stretch your belief system to accommodate so many things that
Yeah.
within religion are just like, you know, maybe not the most believable things, but you can believe all of those things, but there's no way you're going to believe this.
Yeah. Also, interesting trivia that I found, you might have also come across this. So this Edith, so what happens at the end of this film is that this professor sort of brushes off the whole thing saying, okay, fine, I was playing a joke. And it's implied that he obviously wasn't playing a joke, but he just did it so that people wouldn't keep freaking out for the rest of their lives.
I think one of them kind of, the psychologist threatens incarceration. I think that's when he is like, yo, this was just a joke.
Correct. The psychiatrist guy says that I'm going to have you committed to an institution or something. So he says, yeah, this was just a joke. I took it too far and you guys gave me the idea for it and everything. Now this Edith, who's the religious person, when she's leaving, she's kind of like, okay, fine, I'm really unhappy that you did this, but I am a true Christian and in the spirit of Christianity, I'm going to forgive you. And then she kisses him on the cheek before she leaves.
Yeah.
Now,
weird sexual tension there, by the way. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah. She was also kind of eyeing him a little bit when that other professor had some vibes with him. So there's something.
Yeah, probably more age appropriate also, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Although a 30-year-old woman and a 50-year-old woman are almost the same age compared to a 14,000-year-old man. Yeah, I think when Salman Khan is 14,000 years old, he'll still be acting with like 30 years. Okay. So the trivia that I read was that kiss that she gives him on the cheek might have been a reference to so in the Bible when Judas betrays Jesus. The way that he does it is that so there are these bunch of Roman soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Judas identifies Jesus by kissing him on the cheek. And that's how he signals to the soldiers who Jesus is, and they basically arrest him. So that moment of her kissing him, some people are speculating that she's kind of, in a sense, betraying what he intended to say as Jesus, because she's kind of stuck in the religion and myth of it and ignoring the actual message that he was trying to preach of open-mindedness and tolerance and all of that. So I don't know if people are reading too much into that, but that's one thing.
You know what? I feel like that could be correct. Just because that moment was made to be a moment. That kiss on the cheek, that's why I was like weird sexual tension, because it was slow and it was.
Why was
like,
it there otherwise, right?
Yeah, why was it there? It was unnecessary and weird. At least that I was like, what is the reason for this moment?
Yeah.
But this makes a little bit of sense. At least it's a way to explain it.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking of unnecessary and weird, there's one scene which I haven't been able to explain as to why that was in the movie, and maybe you can throw some light on it. So at one point, the phone rings, and this man goes into the room and this woman called Sandy, who's his kind of love interest, quote unquote, also comes into the room. And the call is from a student, and I think she's asking about some grades. And he looks at the paper and he says, "Oh, you passed. It's you got a C plus." And actually, it's a D, but he tells her on the phone that she got a C plus. What is the point of that scene? Because that doesn't fit the movie at all.
I think the point of that scene was to build the connection between the two of them, to show you that there is some sort of like love interest there, that they work closely together, and
The professor and the woman,
and the professor and the woman.
Sandy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the idea of that scene was. It was like just to show you that they have a separate connection outside the group of people, you know.
Yeah.
Could have been done in a different way, but also maybe it's trying to show you that his character, it's kind of trying to build a character sheet for him where he's benevolent and good and like, you know,
Yeah.
trying to help his student even though the student did badly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did feel like they already, I mean, even before that scene, I somehow figured that they had a connection. I don't remember now exactly which scene came before which, but that scene's kind of stuck out to me. I felt like because that's the one scene where they just sort of go into a different room in the house, and it just felt like it stuck out for some reason. But that's probably what you're describing is probably the reason why they put it in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I took away from it. But yeah, there was always the feeling of like they liked each other or she liked him or whatever.
Yeah. There is one twist, second twist, which we also didn't speak about yet. And I'm generally not a fan when movies do two twists. I feel like one is enough and then they just, second is just overkill.
Yeah, I actually didn't like this twist at all. But
I didn't like it either. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to describe it?
Yeah, so basically the psychiatrist who's been questioning him and being the harshest critic of this whole thing, and also the most upset by it because his wife has just died, you know, and this person is claiming that they can live forever. So he, when they're done, when this guy has said, "Hey, this was all a joke. Sorry, I should never have done this," they all start to leave and go back to their houses, and the only person who kind of still believes him is Sandy, right? The love interest. So they're standing outside and talking, and she's asking him, "Have you taken what other kind of clever names have you come up with over the years?" Because his current name is John Oldman,
which I hate, by the way. But yeah,
yuck, yuck. But whatever. We are fucking 14,000 years old. Come up with better puns.
Okay.
Yeah. So John Oldman, and he's like, you know, I've mainly always gone by John. And he was saying a bunch of different last names that he thought were clever. And one of them, and the psychiatrist is just leaving at this point, and he overhears one of the names, and recognizes that name to be his father, which is fully shocking to him. He's like, he has a visceral reaction to it, and he's like, "You're lying. How dare you say that you were this person and teaching at this college?" And then you kind of realize that John, our protagonist for this whole movie, is actually his father, and it's an insane moment because until this point, you could go either ways. You could be like, "Yeah, he was lying." No, he's telling the truth. Which I liked about the movie. I wanted to have the freedom to believe or disbelieve him. Here you're getting like proper proof that he is 14,000 years old, which I think was not needed. And not to mention the little bit of overreacting. This guy hears this news and now he has a heart attack. And
dies from that.
Dies. Fully dies. Which I think was all of this was very unnecessary. I feel like we could have gone home not 100%, not ever being able to be 100% sure. I feel like the amount of surety they gave us was enough. Like I would have been happy with like 80% and 20% of doubt, which they had already given us by this point. So I didn't need the 100%. What do you feel about this whole thing?
So I mean, I also did not like. I mean, I have mixed reactions about it. So one is I definitely did not like that ending and the twist. But I can see another version in which it might have worked. So first I'll talk about why I didn't like it. Pretty much the same like what you said. One is, first of all, I'll mention the fake name that he used those 60, 70 years ago, which is John T. Party, like T initial and Party, because I guess he was teaching in Boston or something. So Boston Tea Parties. I mean, come on. 14,000-year-old guy is
Dude, he's taking dad jokes to like another level because he's been
Yeah.
like that so many times. It's like
the ultimate dad joke guy.
ultimate dad jokes.
But yeah, this guy was super enlightened with the Buddha, and like he was literally Jesus, and he's choosing names like John Oldman and John Tea Party. That just doesn't fit. But that's one reason. Second is, like you said, very overblown reaction by this professor who overhears him. Where he just goes red in the face and he says, "I refuse to believe you." And then they have this back and forth where they were like, where this John Oldman, that's the only time in the movie where he looks slightly emotional, where he talks about things from this other guy's childhood when he was his dad and all. And he left him as a kid, and but I left your mom enough money, and then it just gets into this weird melodrama. And then, like you said, the professor has a heart attack and dies. So terrible ending. But I feel like the reason I didn't like it is, one is because of the melodrama, two is because of the bad puns, three is because there already was a twist before this with the Jesus thing.
Correct.
If there was no Jesus twist and there was only this twist done less melodramatically, I think it could have worked because while I also I like open-ended endings and I like having to decide for myself, but I think it would have been a very sort of interesting, it would have thrown up an interesting question to say, is every location that John Oldman is choosing some form of emotional connection to him? Did he just pick this location because he tracked down his son from 50 years ago and knew that he was teaching there and wanted to be around him? It would have been a chance to introduce this poignant element to, he's immortal and he's kind of just choosing to be around people who have some connection to him, but they don't know that they have a connection to him. So it could have made him like this very tragic character if it was done in a subtle way and not so melodramatically. So yeah, I just don't like it because it's coming after another twist. So I think you can have either one of these twists in the movie, but not both. And you didn't have to do it so over
the top. Yeah. I think the one cool part about this twist was the fact that this is the first time he's ever watched a son of his or a child of his die. So even in 14,000 years, there are still firsts, which I feel like if it was framed in with that lens a little bit more, could have also been cool, but it was really not.
That would have been a good tagline. I mean, it's revealing the essence of the movie, but even in 14,000 years, there are still firsts. Is a good thing to explore in this film.
Yeah.
And yeah, now that you mentioned John Oldman, I know you also mentioned that this movie had some cheesy parts which you didn't like. I'm guessing John Oldman is one of them, right?
Correct, definitely. I mean, the bad pun should not have been in the movie.
And I'll just tell people how that comes about, because it's just introduced at the most terrible moment possible. Because now there's a scene where they've been having this serious discussion for 15-20 minutes where he's like, oh, I'm 14,000 years old, and he's talking about all of these philosophical things that he's learned and everything, and the room has a very somber energy. And then these two movers and packers come into the room because obviously this is his last day at the university, so he's moving out. And one mover guy is like, is this John Oldman? And it's just so jarring at that moment to make that joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything else in this movie that you didn't like in terms of cheesiness?
I felt like a couple of things that didn't hold up for me. And I know we've been shitting on this movie a little bit, which is fair. It should be shat on a bit, but it is also a really cool movie.
Yeah.
That I feel like we need to make that clear. I enjoyed my rewatch of it also. It's like some of it doesn't hold up. Like the sound of the movie is quite bad. I felt like some characters were louder than others. I don't know whether it was the platform I was watching it on or what, but like it's like I had to like ride the volume button on this movie more than I've had to on a movie for a while. The music choices are quite bad. I feel like only the Beethoven, I think there's Beethoven or Bach or someone, they did classical piece. I thought that was kind of okay. Everything else, terrible. And other than that, some of the acting was not so great. And but it always felt kind of like a play, which I enjoyed. It's like, because you don't get to watch plays as movies. So even though the acting was a little bit over the top, it felt like it would fit if you were watching a play, because like actors in plays kind of are louder than they should be because they're trying to get their voice across the room and they're not mic'd up. And they have bigger like actions. So I felt like that was kind of the ethos of this. It was almost like a play in movie form.
I agree. I think the acting, it did feel a little theatrical. I initially thought that maybe these aren't professional actors because it felt like it was just a group of people that made a movie together. But then I looked them up and they're all professional actors. In fact, one common thing that many of them have is that they've all appeared on Star Trek. So I guess it might be this network of this guy who wrote the movie that he just was able to get these actors together. But yeah, the sound mixing, I agree, was like I faced the same thing with the volume where suddenly you can't hear someone, so you turn up the volume and the next sentence is deafening from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I also didn't like the score, but since you're a musician, maybe you can explain why the score is not good. I couldn't put my finger on what was not good about it.
First of all, the level the music was mixed at was bad. Every time music is not in the movie for the most part, right? Like it comes in very select places, I think, and when it happens, I feel like it's too loud, and it's just not great. It feels really dated, but maybe the movie is kind of old. But I feel like older movies have great scores also. It's probably just a budget thing, right? Like I feel like they didn't have budgets for the music, so they just kind of put something in there because the movie had to have music. I almost feel the movie would have been better with no music whatsoever. Just some ambient sound, and we'll move on with our lives.
One thing I was able to uncover is that the director and the composer of this movie never met. So apparently they only spoke over the phone because the composer is somebody that lives in the UK and the director was American. And I guess it probably was a budget thing. Yeah. But I agree, it could have just been music free because I didn't feel at any point like the music was adding to it. It was distracting. In some cases, there was this constant undertone of music in some scenes, which was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that about covers what we want to talk about with regard to the movie. Is there anything we haven't touched upon?
No, I think we've fully covered this movie from start to end. The more enjoyable things about this movie are some of the themes and some of the questions and some of the concepts you get, which I feel like concepts about time and concepts about the psychiatrist, those questions that he asked was super, super interesting. And even though there were a lot of questions not asked, the ones that were asked were really thought-provoking, and you think about this movie for a bit. Even if it's like you're watching it today and you're 35 and not 18, it'll stick with you for a bit, I think.
Yeah, and again, just to clarify, I think both of us recommend this movie. I know we spent some time talking about its flaws and things we didn't like, but overall, it's definitely something that is worth watching.
Fully agree.
Okay, great. So that is The Man from Earth. So if people watch it or have watched it already, let us know what you also think in the comment section. We're approaching the end of this conversation now, but obviously before we conclude, we have a couple of important things to do. First is the signature quiz round. Nice. So I have 5 quiz questions for you. And obviously the intent is not to test you or your knowledge in any ways, to have fun, and if we're learning through this, then we're winning, right? But let's see how many of these questions you're able to get correctly. Are you ready? Okay, so these are all questions that are either, they're not one of them maybe is directly linked to the movie, but the others are linked to things that the movie is talking about, or you get the picture. Okay.
Excited.
Question number 1. Somewhat unusually, the producer of this film, Eric Wilkinson, publicly thanked Dash for the success of this movie, saying that it lifted the profile of this film far beyond his expectations. I
am gonna guess. Wait, say again.
So somewhat unusually, the producer of this film, Eric Wilkinson, publicly thanked Dash for the success of this film, saying that it lifted the profile of the movie far beyond his expectations.
Okay, because it's cult status and because this movie was written in a time where the way I watched it was I pirated it. is I'm gonna guess that it is like Pirate Bay or like one of these like P2P, like
Yeah.
some file sharing thing that he's talking about here.
You're spot on. So he was thanking the users of BitTorrent
Nice.
for pirating this film because he said like if so many people hadn't pirated it, hardly anyone would have watched it. And
Makes
I
full
also
sense.
yeah, this was a piracy phenomenon, by the way. I think everybody who's a certain age, especially I'm sure, and everyone who's lived in an engineering hostel in the 2000s has watched this movie because this was like a big piracy sensation back in the day. And I also watched the first time I watched it was like a pirated version.
I paid now for it by watching like 700 ads on this Plex platform, man.
Yeah. Oh, it always catches up with you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're great. You're already off to a winning start.
Nice.
Second question. In the Rastafarian faith, the term X is used for any political system which is oppressive or unjust. Rastafarians also use the term X to refer to the police, who are often seen as a source of oppression because they arrest members for the use of marijuana, which is sacramental for Rastafarians. So what is X? If you want, I can give you a further hint.
Okay. Say again one more time. Sorry, I'm going to make you say all these questions.
Yeah. No worries. Repeating. In the Rastafarian faith, the term X is used for any political system which is oppressive or unjust. Rastafarians also use X to refer to the police, often seen as a source of oppression because they arrest people for the use of marijuana, which is considered sacramental for Rastafarians. So what is X? I have a further hint if you want it.
Yeah, maybe I have ideas, but I don't think they're right. So maybe I'll take the further hint.
You want to say what your idea is, and I won't count it as your answer.
Okay. So the term "pigs for police" is like a common term to like whatever discredit the police.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the origin of it, but I don't know.
No, it's not that.
It's not.
Okay, so I'll tell you the hint.
Okay.
You may get it from the hint. Okay, so the hint is a song called "Rivers of X" was recorded by the Jamaican reggae group the Melodians in 1970.
Babylon.
Sorry?
Is it Babylon?
Yeah, it is Babylon.
Okay, good.
So the Rivers of Babylon is a well-known song. The version of it that's much better known than the original is the Bonnie M cover version of it from 1978. So the term Babylon is used for any political system which is oppressive or unjust.
I have no idea. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Now that song actually has a proper meaning. I thought there was a river in Babylon, and that was it.
And so this now you know why this is connected to this film.
Yeah.
Because the man from Earth claims that he spent a good amount of time in Babylon as well.
Yeah.
Okay. David Lee Smith, who is the lead actor of this film, he's mainly acted in soap operas, procedurals, and other TV shows. However, he has minor roles in not one but two movies made by a critically acclaimed director who shares his first name. And the movies that I'm talking about were released in 1999 and 2007 respectively. So I'll repeat. David Lee Smith, the lead actor of this film, has mainly acted in soap operas, procedurals, and other TV shows. However, he has minor roles in not one but two movies made by a critically acclaimed director who shares his first name. And the movies I'm speaking about were released in 1999 and 2007. So name the director and bonus points if you get the movies also.
Man, so I can't remember names of anybody or anything actually. So this is the worst question for me because I can't remember any director's name. Now I'm trying to think. Is David E. Kelly? I don't know.
His name is David Lee Smith. So the director's name is David.
Yeah, David. What are the years of the film? 1999 and 2007. You said.
Yeah, 1999 2007.
So is it like a sequel situation?
No, the movies are unrelated to each other.
Unrelated. Oh.
Okay, I'll tell you the tagline of the first movie. The 1999 movie, the tagline is Mischief, Mayhem, Soap.
Mischief, Mayhem, Soap.
That's the lesser known tagline. I mean, there's another one.
Okay. Okay, so I don't. Hot Tub Time Machine didn't come out in 1999, right? Mr. Mayhem Soap.
Okay,
Is it one of those Gremlin movies? What is it?
no, it's not. What did you say? One of those?
Gremlin movies. What is the thing
No,
where
no,
you
it's not.
put
It's not a
water?
franchise. It's a standalone. It's movie.
No.
I'll tell you the second movie ka tagline. This 2000 movie tagline.
Uh-huh.
There's more than one way to lose your life to a killer. I'm fairly certain you would have watched both these movies. You've definitely heard of both these movies, and I'm like knowing you, you probably would have watched one or both at least.
Okay. No,
Even if it may not.
I'm going blank, and I'm sure like people are shouting at their podcast device. I don't know how people listen to podcasts, but they're probably shouting the answers right now. I'm fully drawing a blank.
Okay, I'll make the 99 movie obvious to you.
Okay.
The first rule of this movie is that you.
Club.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So Fight Club is 1999.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that throw any light?
He was in Fight Club. This dude?
He was in Fight Club. Apparently, as some guy named Walter. Very minor part.
Okay, cool. That's nice. So wait.
So the director is David Fincher. David Fincher, who directed Fight Club. And
right.
He's also in a 2007 movie directed by David Fincher, which is.
And what is the this thing of the 2007 movie?
Tagline is "There's more than one way to lose your life to a killer," which is a great tagline given the subject of this movie. It's a movie about a serial killer, and a cartoon becomes obsessed with investigating this serial killer, and over the decades.
A cartoon, you said what?
A cartoonist becomes so this is a serial killer, which is sort of like a cold case which people are not able to solve, and this cartoonist is able to. He kind of becomes obsessed with solving it, and it's a real life story. You may not have seen this if you haven't got it by now.
Maybe Seven is one.
No, Seven is also by David Fincher, but it's not. I think that's 95 if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So this is Zodiac.
Oh, Zodiac! Yeah, I've seen it.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen Zodiac.
Yeah.
So there's more. The reason is there's more than one way to lose your life to a killer because this cartoonist guy gets too obsessed with it and it destroys his personal life and everything.
Yeah, hectic. I haven't seen that movie in like forever. Obviously, I'm like I said, I watched movies once, so I saw it and now I don't remember anything. In fact, Seven and Zodiac are the same movie in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's similar, same director, similar serial killer being tracked by police kind of thing. Cool. If anyone who's listening to this wants to come on this podcast and discuss Zodiac, I would love to. Okay, so next question number 4. This is an interesting one. I feel like you may have heard, I can't remember whether I put this in one of the quizzes that, so just for the listeners, in the pandemic, I used to do some online quizzes and which Karun also has been part of. I don't know.
There's no chance I will remember if you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So in 2013, a Kenyan lawyer named Dola Indidis. The name of the lawyer is irrelevant, so I'm just going to say a Kenyan lawyer. So in 2013, a Kenyan lawyer filed a lawsuit at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, in which he named the states of Israel and Italy along with a couple of other individuals. What was the subject of this lawsuit?
Hectic.
Remember, these are all connected to this movie.
The movie. See again.
In 2013, a lawyer from Kenya filed a lawsuit at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, in which he named the states of Israel and Italy along with a couple of individuals. I want to know what is the subject of this lawsuit.
Was it something archaeological?
Not archaeological as such, but it is something ancient, or it's not a very topical lawsuit, let's say.
Okay. Any hints?
The countries involved are fairly hint-worthy, I would say.
Okay, so Italy and Israel.
Yeah, Italy is less so. Israel. I mean, Italy. Yeah.
Is it the birthplace of Christ?
It is connected to Christ in some way. You're on the right track.
Okay, so it is.
It's a pretty ridiculous lawsuit, to be honest.
Are some of them claiming to have like relics of Christ that he's like you can't hold on to them? I don't know.
No, not exactly. So I'll give you partial points for getting the Jesus Christ part of it.
Okay.
So he's basically, this lawsuit was to hold them liable for unlawful prosecution of Jesus Christ.
Oh, hectic.
So because Italy, because
The
Roman
Romans.
Empire,
Yeah. That
and
makes
Israel
sense.
because Israel. So apparently, this lawyer Dola Endidis challenged the mode of questioning used during Jesus' trial, the punishments meted out to him while proceedings were still underway, and the substance of the information used to convict him. And he included the states of Italy and Israel because they have ties to the Roman Empire. And the other two people named in the lawsuit were King Herod and Pontius Pilate, who obviously were the two instrumental people in prosecuting.
Did they get lawyers? I mean, like, did the court assign lawyers?
No, thankfully not. Yeah, but the guy who brought this motion was a lawyer.
Oh man.
Yeah, cool, right? Last question. This is where I've sent you
a picture.
A picture for which is a visual aid for this question.
One second.
And I will also,
do I have to look at this picture?
If you looked at it once, it should be enough. But you can look at it again. Yeah. And I'll also put the picture up for people who are watching this on YouTube. And people who are not watching this on YouTube, I'll just describe the image a little bit. So it's an image where it's a church in a field, and there's a few people outside. It's a very small church in a field, and there's a few people outside the church wearing like dark clothes and veils. So probably like people in mourning outside a church is how I would describe it. Now that's the image. Here's the question. So this question is, I mean, we mentioned Netherlands and Italy in the previous question because Italy was mentioned in the lawsuit and this court of justice is in the Netherlands. So this question is also connected to both of those countries. In 2002, two paintings worth over $100 million were stolen from the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And again, Van Gogh is connected to this movie because this guy knew Van Gogh at some point. So these two paintings worth over $100 million were stolen from the Van Gogh Museum in 2002. And they were only recovered 14 years later during a raid at a mafia don's villa in Italy. So in Naples, some mafia don had these paintings in his house. One of the paintings is the image that I sent you and that I'm projected and that I described right now. It's called Congregation Leaving the Reformed Church at Newnen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mm-hmm. The title of the painting is irrelevant. So basically, it's just a painting about a church painted by Vincent van Gogh. It was painted in 1884 and it was modified in 1885 after a change in Van Gogh's life. So I want you to like guess, or if you know, tell me what the modification was in this painting. Very convoluted question. I'll just repeat.
No, yes, you should. But this one is the one I don't need you to repeat. But for everybody else, yes, you should.
Oh, you managed to keep track of all of that. But I'll just repeat anyway. Gist of it is that these two paintings were stolen from the Vincent van Gogh Museum. They were recovered 14 years later in the house of a mafia don in Italy. That's just background info. The one painting that I'm focusing on is this painting of a church, which is what I've described. This painting was made in 1884, but Vincent van Gogh made a change to it in like a year later. What is the change that he made? Can you guess or do you know?
Okay, so I never know anything. Everything I'm saying is guesses. Okay. So the guess I am making is, did he change religion at some point, Van Gogh?
It's a great guess. It's not right, but I love that guess.
Oh shit. Okay, cool. So my original guess was going to be that he changed religion, so he's taken off the cross from the church or something like that. So to make it less churchy.
Nice.
Which
great. I wish that was true, but the real answer is also pretty cool.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, he did change something in the painting where he introduced new elements into the painting, which were not there before. I'll give you a hint. So something in this current version of the painting wasn't in the original one. So what is the new element that he introduced and why?
Was the title always the same?
The title was, I don't know whether the title was the same. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't the same.
Could it be did he change the color of the clothing that the people were wearing to mourn someone's loss?
Yes, you are correct. So basically, Vincent van Gogh's father died in 1885. and his father was actually the pastor at this church in the image. So he added, I think he had one or two people in the image initially, but he added people in mourning in black clothing after the death of his father.
Nice. That felt very satisfying to guess.
Yeah, great. So
Very nice painting.
Nice painting, and you did pretty well in this quiz.
I mean, you were kind of lenient. I didn't actually do well.
No, you got one question completely correct, and then you got like partial points for several of them. So that's pretty good.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you so much, Karun. That
very
was
fun.
the man from Earth, and hope I had a lot of fun. Before we conclude this conversation, I'd love if you could just tell people where they can follow you, your work, the work of your bands, and the other artists that you collaborate with. Anything that you want to put out there.
So you can follow me at Karun K on Instagram. That's the only real social media platform I'm active on. Other than that, I normally announce everything there. I also have Drum House, which is again at the rate Drum House, where you can sign up for classes if you want to hit some stuff with sticks. It's a good place to find me and learn how to play some drums. Other than that, many bands, many musics. Just see what you like and listen if you can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karun, and I highly recommend that people check out Karun's drum classes as well. So yeah, this was fun, and my personal appeal, as always, I'm trying to grow this channel and eventually monetize it. I have to hit certain milestones in order to be able to do that. So I would love if I could one day have at least 14,000 subscribers. One for every year that this man from Earth has been alive.
Nice.
Probably 14,018 now that it's been 18 years since the movie came out. So 14018 is what I'm targeting.
It's the goal.
Is the goal, and currently I'm like around 14,000 short of that. So
Achievable, very achievable.
Achievable. So yeah, please like, share, subscribe, comment. You know the drill. And thank you.
Thanks.